All right, this is the assembly guide for the FrankenTimer by Game Mode Repository. So this is version 4 of my Arduino-based King of the Hill timer. And this time I actually designed a 3D printable housing. So I'm going to go through how to assemble that. So yeah, let's go ahead and get to it. Sorry, the video is not the best. I think sometimes I might be slightly out of frame. But it is what it is. So hopefully it helps make building this timer easier. Just as a note, so for this timer, this video is to help you kind of visually understand where things go, but you'll also want to use the build guide on the website. So both the electronics build guide and the assembly guide. The assembly guide will give you like wiring diagrams and things that will help out, and then the electronics just gives you other helpful hints as well. So you kind of need to read all those guides together, and hopefully this should help you figure out how to assemble this. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to install the heat inserts into the different layers. So if you're building the core, you take layer 3, there's a heat insert here and here for the LCD screen. On the rotary encoder piece, there are 2 inserts as well, so there's one here and here. On layer 5, where the Arduino attaches, there's 2, so one here and here. Alright, so for layer 6, you're going to install 10 total on layer 6, so there's going to be 4 heat inserts on this side, 4 heat inserts on this side, and then 2 on this side. These 2 are for the charging cord door. And then if you're building the actual housing shell outside the core, you got the main shell body, that has 8 as well, so 4 on the top side, and then 4 on the bottom side. Alright, and then finally, you're going to install some heat inserts on the base. So there's 3, so 1, 2, 3 that are installed for the access door. I don't have it printed here, but there's also 2 that you're going to install, so the one's going to be here and one's going to be here. That's so that if you want to, you can bolt it down to say a bucket tube or something like that. So that's what those ones are going to be for. Like I said, this print doesn't have it, but the finished ones that are on the website, that print has the holes for the heat inserts there. Alright, so up next, you're going to want to cut all your wires, and I'm going to put that table on the website. I'll show it here real quickly, but I'd say either just pause this, go to the website, look at that table. That's going to tell you how to cut all your wires. Alright, so up next, you're going to want to cut your LED strip. So you're going to want to count out 40 LEDs. So right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So do that all the way down until you get 40. Once you get to 40, right, you can use like some scissors, and you're going to cut it right down the center of the leads. So that's how you cut the LED strip. Alright, so you should go ahead and solder on your wires to your power strip. So we've got these ones here. This one here, I labeled all mine based off that chart that I cut, so I'm not going to go through and tell you all the links. But you do want to do the two wires that are going to go to USB. They should be on this left pin. The wire that needs to go to the twist cap is going to be on the right pin. It looks kind of like a center pin if there was a third pin, but it's that one right there. One other thing you want to be careful about is you don't want these to extend down too far. So you want to do a nice short little area there. Don't extend your heat shrink too far down, just to make sure that there's enough clearance underneath the part. All right, and that's soldering your power switch. Right, so next you're going to want to cut your wires for the rotary encoder and solder those on. So then, right, so you have on your rotary encoder, you have 2 prongs on one side, 3 prongs on the other side. So you'll solder the green wire to one of the prongs on the 2 sides, it doesn't matter which one. And then you will solder the ground wire to the other prong on that 2 side, and then that ground wire along with the other ground wire will get soldered to the center prong of the opposite side. And then you'll solder a yellow wire to one of the left prong, and you'll solder the blue wire to the right prong of the 3 side. And that will be your rotary encoder all soldered up. Couple things to know. The quality on these rotary encoders, they vary. So it doesn't really matter which side gets blue and which side gets yellow on that 3 prong. You can swap those. They might get swapped just because of the quality of these. So something to know. All right, so next you're going to want to wire up your switches, your buttons. So a couple of things here. So I soldered all my wires on. You'll notice here I put heat shrink on. However, on some of these other spots, this looks kind of nasty because I actually covered it up in hot glue. So, right, these 3, I want it to run vertically down. I didn't want it to come out this way because there's just not a lot of room in the timer if you have it coming out that way. So I soldered it on vertically, and then since I couldn't put a very easy heat shrink on there, I went ahead and just covered it with some hot glue to make sure that during my assembly I wouldn't get any kind of unintended electrical contact. So to start, there's a couple things you need to know about this. Quality control is not great on these. So, right, this lead and this lead are for your LEDs. These 2 leads are for your switch. So the yellow wire, that's got a 220 ohm resistor soldered to it. So the 220 ohm resistor gets soldered to the yellow wire, and then that resistor gets soldered to this lead. Because the quality control is not great, the LED might actually be the wrong way. But luckily you can actually just pop this out. So you just pull on it, and then you could turn it around if you needed to. So if when you solder it together, the light's not lighting up, then yeah, just pull it out, turn it around, shove it back in. That should fix it. Yeah, so a little bit of quality control there. But yeah, so you're going to solder your yellow wire with the 220 ohm resistor to here. You solder your blue wire to here, again making sure it runs vertically down. You'll solder your 2-inch ground wire from this lead to here, and then you'll solder your other ground wire from that lead down there. As far as wire lengths, you can just look at the table that I provide on the website. So yeah, pretty simple. The blue one will get wired up the same way. Yeah, I think that's it. Alright, so before you can solder the LEDs, you're going to have to remove this clear protection coating. So I just use an X-Acto knife to kind of cut that off, clean it off. Just make sure that you're not damaging the leads. So then once you have that all cleared off, you're going to solder the red LED wire to this 5 volt. It says 5+ volt. I don't know if you can see that. Might be too much of a glare. You're going to solder the black ground wire to this side over here to this ground spot, and then the center lead you're going to solder some wire for the signal wire. So that should be an orange wire, and that says DIN, so digital in. So that's how you're going to solder those. Or if you want to, you can actually get these quick connects. I like to use these quick connects because I do a lot of things with LEDs, so I have them. They're not necessary. I didn't start with them originally, but they can be nice. So the only downside to that is the quick connects, you can't really fit the 18 gauge wire in there, so you have to have more like a 20 gauge wire, which I have on hand. So I went ahead and used it. You don't have to use it, but yeah, it is. So right here you can see what I was talking about, where I got my red wire on this 5-volt. I've got my black wire on the ground. I've got my orange wire on the digital in. And I do think it's better to solder the orange wire, the actual wire, to the LED lead, and then solder the resistors to that wire, right? So I've got two 20 ohm resistors here, so there's one 20 ohm resistor there, one 20 ohm resistor there. So you do need two resistors there, right? Make sure you cover those with heat wrap, and yeah, that is how you solder up the LED. Or use the quick connect if that's what you want to do. Oh, just as a quick thought, these wires are actually too long right now, so I need to trim those down. I just didn't know exactly what wire length I wanted to trim it down to, but the table that I gave you earlier, that will have the correct wire lengths. Okay, you're going to want to go ahead and solder on your XT60 connector to your LED wires. So I put the female connector onto my LED wires that are going to attach to my layer 3. So I do that, and then on the wires that are going to connect to my actual LEDs, I solder on the male connector there. Alright, so once I've got everything soldered together, I'm going to take my rotary encoder, I'm going to take the nut and washer off, going to install it into its stand, put the washer and nut back on, use some pliers to get it nice and tight. Alright, and that's now installed, so I can go ahead and put the little cover button on, just slide that on. Alright, now I can install it into my layer 3. So you want to have the opening with the wires facing the power switch, so it's going to go on like that. So I can just slide it into the holes. Alright, and then I'm just going to take a M3 screw that is 10 millimeters long. I'm going to install and attach it to there. Make it nice and snug. Alright, so here you got the little backpack for the LCD. That goes in this gap right here. So I just put it on like that. Again, I'm going to take a M3 10 millimeter long screw. Install that there. Leave that a little loose while I get the other one lined up. LCD screens all hooked up. So now this is ready to start wiring. So before I start wiring that off, I'm actually going to put that to the side and pull out my new Arduino Mega. I'm going to take layer 5 and I'm going to install it on layer 5. So that hole lines up right there. So install there. Again, just using a M3 10mm screw. Leave that a little loose while I get the other one aligned. So this one's going to go right there. Get a snug fit, don't want to tighten it down too much. Alright, now my Arduino's installed. So now I'm ready to start wiring these two together. Putting all the wires in here. So I got all these channels for the wires, so we can start running the wires. Alright, once I've got my Arduino installed, I'm going to do a temporary install where I install it onto layer 6. So you'll notice on layer 6 there's some gaps here. That is the part that you want to away from it. You want to have this nice flush area. That's the part that's going to mount to layer 5. And also you can look for the little door opening here. That little door opening is what goes over this data port here to help orientate you on where it needs to be. So I can flip that over. Like I said, this is just a temporary install. I'm going to come back and take these screws out in a little bit, but for now I'm just going to do that to make it easier to run my wires. So I'll put one in there, and I'm just using this 14mm M3 screws that I'm planning on using to mount the base and all the other top cover together. So I'm going to put 3 of these in. I'm not even going to put all 4. Like I said, not permanent, just a little temporary fit so that as I start to run my wires, it's just held together a little bit easier to make it easier to run the wires. Alright, so next I'm going to install my MP3 player. So I'm going to use the base door since I'm using my housing. If you're doing the core, then you might want to install it on the option A, which is layer 7. But this is option B. Unfortunately, I can't use the M3 screws because these holes are too small, and I haven't figured out a way to I didn't figure out a way to hold that down. So I'm just going to use a couple of small screws. You might be able to pull these from an old blaster, or I can provide a link to some as well. So that's just going to screw on there. You don't need to tighten it too much. Just get it nice and snug. Alright, so that's nice and snug. I could install the other 2 screws, but you don't have to. Since I don't need them, I'm not going to do it, but I did put the holes there in case people want to put all 4 in. Alright, that's my MP3 installed. You have access to the memory card, so you can take that out if you want. To update the sounds. Alright, if you do want to go with option A for the MP3 player, if you're just doing the core, there's a couple things you should know. First off, ignore these heat sinks. They're not in the final design. I was messing around with trying to put like some kind of cover on here, but I didn't like it, so those aren't in the final design right now. Maybe in the future I'll go revisit. But basically you're gonna put your MP3 right there. You'll screw down these 2 spots, and you'll have access to your micro SD card right there. One thing to know is that if you are going to go with this option, it's going to have the aux cord permanently attached. So you actually want to feed that down through that hole, and then feed it back up through this hole, right? And that can then get attached into the Arduino, and then you can have that installed there. Pull that through and have it snug. This is a zip tie down for the cord, but it does mean that your cord's permanently attached. You won't be able to take it on and off. There wasn't a great spot for the core on how I wanted to do that. Maybe I'll revisit it sometime in the future, but trying to get it down here, it wasn't working. So yeah, that's how that's set up right now. So yeah, that's option B. Maybe in the future I'll revisit that, see if I can put in a better spot for the core. But it's in a pretty decent spot if you're doing the actual full housing. So there you go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start installing my wires into my Arduino. So I'm going to start with my power and ground wire for the Arduino. So these, you're going to take a couple DuPont, of the DuPont wires. You're going to cut these down to 10 inches, and that is from the tip of the male DuPont wire to the end. So you want 10 inches, which is basically a full length wire. So you're basically just going to cut off the female connector. And then you're going to install these. So I'm going to have a link to the wiring diagram. You're going to want to use the wiring diagram to actually know how to install these. But basically, so I'm going to take this male connector. I'm going to find the 5-volt pin. So I got the 5-volt pin right there. Make sure I get the right one. Push that down. I can see that I got it in the right spot. And then there's a corresponding groove right here, so I'm going to hold that down, run it through that groove, hold it in place, right? Follow the rest of the groove, which this is why you're going to want to use the wiring diagram, because it makes it nice and clear which groove it's supposed to go through. I actually use a screwdriver, a little flathead screwdriver, to help push it down into that groove to make sure it's nice and seated. So there we go. So that runs the red wire, or the red 5-volt power. So then, right, I can take my ground wire, which goes right next to that one. Right, so my ground connects to the ground. Again, there's a nice little groove there. Hold it in place to make sure it's not popping out. And then I just run it through that groove. Push down on that. All right, and then that's the ground wire. So now I'm going to do the rest of the wires. I'm just going to speed that up because otherwise it's going to take forever. But you can look at the wiring diagram. The wiring diagram is going to make it nice and clear where all the wires go through and what channels they're running through. All right. Over here. All right. So these two loops right here, you're actually going to loop around twice. So we're going to go 1 and then 2. Making sure that gets pushed down in there. Okay. All right, that should be good to go. All right, so all your wires should be installed now on layer 3. So at this point, I actually like to take a little bit of mailing tape. Just kind of tape that down a little bit, making sure not to block my screw holes. So, some tape there. Some tape over there. All right, that just kind of helps hold it in place. So that's all wired up. I actually like to put a little bit of tape on these as well, just to make sure that those stay connected. So I'm gonna take a small piece and add it down here. That just gives it a little bit more strength. Make sure it doesn't pop out. All right. So that is all wired up for that layer. All right, now that we've got all our wires cut and we've got our power wires wired to the switch, we're going to go ahead and install all these power and ground wires onto layer 3. All right, so to start, I am going to feed these wires from the power switch down through the hole. Making sure I want this this lead right there to be over on this side. So it should look something like that, assuming your switches are just like mine. All right, so I got this lead on this side, and I got these two on the right hand side. All right, and I'm gonna feed that down into that groove, feed it around, down here. All right, pull that nice and tight. I can then feed these ones into this groove, and this one into that groove. All right, so now I'm actually gonna attach all my wires with the twist cap here. All right, so I actually forgot to solder on my XT60 connector. So for the LED wires, before you wire that all in, which I'll go over in a minute, you're going to want to actually solder on your XT60 connector. And then you'll have to feed the wires XT60 connector down through the hole, and then feed it over into the spots to do that. One thing, right, when you're doing that, you don't have to run it through the channels to start. You can just kind of have it loose so that you can do the twist caps easily. So, right, before you go and do wire this all up, make sure you got the XT60. I put the female end of the XT60 on the layer 3 wires. Okay, so I trimmed off all these. Feed these, start twisting these all together. Okay, once I've got those all twisted together, take my twist cap, put that on, twist that down. Make sure that's all good. Those are all secure. I'm going to take my zip tie. So I want that right there. Feed my zip tie through there. Down through there. sides. Now I can feed these wires down through here. Pull those out. All right, so actually, all right, so that's all fit down in there. I can actually install that onto my LCD. All right, so I've got a little bit of wire there. All right, so that's all good there. So I labeled mine when I pulled them out, so that's to my junction. So this one's actually going to go down through here. So those are all my 5-volt power wires. So that's nice and tied down. Got room here, got some room there. Got that on, got those. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, so now let's move on to the ground wires. All right, so now we're going to install our ground wires. So the first thing you're going to do is you're actually going to want to twist these all together. So take all my wires, get them lined up. Okay, just kind of twist those all together. Put a twist cap on them. Okay, that's all twisted. Actually feed that through there. Grab my twist tie. There. Where I want it. There we go. It's all twisted tied down. Okay. I can actually cut this. All right, so that is now all wired up. All right, so I'm going to just take a little bit of mailing tape just to help hold those wires in place. They're pretty snug with the grooves, but I like to just have a little bit extra. So put that right there. Again, it's probably not necessary. I just like to have that little extra stability there. Just make sure you don't cover up the ball holes. All right, and that is layer 3 all wired up. Okay. All right, so next you're gonna wanna attach your USB connectors to your power switch and main ground wires, right? So that's the ones that are running off here. So you'll attach red to, don't know if you can see that. There's a little like V plus symbol there, and then there's a negative symbol there. So you'll attach those to there. Do that for both of them. Okay, so we're gonna remove the temporary screws that we put in earlier. Take those ones out. Alright, so next I'm going to put on my battery tray. So I've got a little notch there, so I'm going to line that up with the notch over here. You're going to take your battery, you're going to plug in your charging cord, make sure that's all attached. I'm also going to install the little USB cover. I did the one with the loop so that I could attach a rubber band to make sure it stays together. And then you're going to want to look at your USB. So you got the male portion right there and the female portion right there. You're going to have the male portion is the part that's going to want to lay flat on the USB. So I'm going to install that there. Going to take my layer 3 and install that on top of that. I'm not going to plug in the USBs yet because I still got to connect some of the power wires. So we'll just leave those uninstalled right now, get everything lined up. Going to use so these are M3 screws that are 40 millimeters long. So I'm just going to slide those in. Go ahead and screw those down. Okay, so I still got my USB disconnected, and so now I'm going to work on doing the twist cap for junction 4 and junction 3. So we'll do that next. Alright, so I've got my power cable from junction 2. And I've got my power cable from my Arduino, so I'm going to twist those together. And then I've got my power cable from my MP3, so those three all get twisted together. And this is forming junction 3. Go ahead and put my twist cap on there. Nice and tight. Alright, so that is good. I can actually go ahead and run that wire down. Alright, so now I'm going to work on getting the ground. Alright, so now I'm going to do my twist cap number 4. So I've got my ground wire from my twist cap 1. I've got my Arduino ground wire, so twist those. I've got my MP3 ground wire. And then, with the female connector. And then I've got my rotary encoder ground wire with the female connector. There. Twist those all together. Alright, so those are all twisted together. Push that ground wire there. Alright, so now those junctions are all put together. Now that those junctions are put together, I can go ahead and do my rotary encoder wires. So I can push my blue into the groove up here, yellow into that groove, green into that groove, and then kind of flip that in there. I can put my black ground wire, that one, those grooves, it might just be easier to connect these. So black to black. Blue to blue. Green to green. Finally, yellow to yellow. So those are all connected, so I can grab my zip tie. Feed my zip tie through that tie down strap, tie down location. Okay. Get those positioned where I want them. Okay. Those are all hooked up. That's nice and snug. Cut off the extra zip tie. Alright, and now I can actually run these wires a little bit better. So that goes there. Black one. Feed right there. Push that down. Alright. And then I can actually put some tape on there to help hold it in place. Alright, so that is my rotary encoder all wired up. Just kind of tuck these in here. Alright, there we go. So next I'll do my LCD. So I'm going to take the yellow wire, and that goes next to my red wire. So I'm going to connect that there. And that, there's a little groove right there for it to sit in. So I can push it down in there. And then I can do my green wire. So that goes next to that. Make sure those are all pushed in nice and snug. So, right, black, red, yellow, green. Again, there's a little groove there, so I can push that down into there. So that's nice and snug. And if I have to, I can go get my tool to kind of help push that down. Yeah, there we go. So now the LCD is all wired up. Alright, so next I will run my button wires. So, alright, my button wires, I got the yellow one, so that should be able to just feed up through that hole. Blue one should be able to feed up through that hole. Alright, and I can push them down into their grooves. So both of those have grooves. And I can do the same thing on the other side. So feed my blue wire up through that one. Feed my yellow one up through there. Push those down into their grooves. And then right, I can feed my orange LED wire up through here. Push that down into its groove. Alright, so there's the buttons and LEDs. Okay, so now, it's a little bit tricky, but I gotta get my USB plugged in. Right, so you should have the male part of the USB on the bottom, so I'm gonna make sure that's flipped the correct way. Just kind of look down there and just push it into place. So that one's pushed in. Make sure that one's the same way. Down there. Plug it in place. All right, so those are plugged in. I can secure these wires with a zip tie. All right, so those are all secure. I can run my charging cable down through that slot. And of course I can cut off the excess zip tie. All right, so now we're all plugged in. Make sure my power's off. Yeah, should be good to go. Keep. All right, so now is a good time to install the data cable. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. You don't have to necessarily put the data cable in there. I change my code quite often. You probably won't change your code very often, so you might want to just disassemble if you want to access it. But if you do want to put the data cable in there for when we do updates, yeah, this is a good time to do that. You can just kind of put it in there. Oh, one thing you want to make sure, that you have the USB cap on there, right? This is going to have access to electrical power, so you don't want to get any kind of shorts by this connecting with, like, say, your power USB. So do put that cable on there. So, right, I can just squeeze that all in there, and that sits in there. All right, now my data cable is in there. So now I can put my layer 7 on. So I can run my MP3 wires up through here. So those can go in there. My yellow one can go in there. So those are nice. Right, so if you're doing a core, then you probably have your MP3 installed here. If you're running MP3, if you're not running MP3, so I could then wire up my core. So I guess I'll show that. So green wire goes here. So this is right. This is just if you're doing the core. That goes there. Green goes on this outer section. Right. Yellow goes down in here. So yellow goes on the second one. I can run my red over here. So I can install red. So my power to the MP3. And then I can run that down through here. Just leave the excess down in that open gap down there. Install my ground. Run that down through there. Okay. Right, and then, right, so if I was doing the core, do that, probably put some tape here to kind of help hold it in place. Oh, if you're doing the core, you're going to want to run your cable, your aux cable through here. Put that in. Right, and I can zip tie it down there. I'm not going to do a core, I'm going to use my shell. So I'm actually going to take this all off. So I'll go ahead and just take that off. I forgot to mention, so if you are going to do the alternate configuration, right, so this is your core, right, we got layers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That makes up the core. If you're going to do an alternate configuration, the alternate configuration, I haven't finished modeling that one yet, but it's going to be it is going to have a slim shell for you to provide some attachment points to attach it to whatever housing you're going to use, right? If you're going to use my housing, right, so I have my shell that goes on the outside that the buttons mount to. That's a much bulkier thing, but I am planning on creating a model that is much more slim and just gives some mounting bolts, so then you can put your buttons kind of wherever you want, and you can use whatever outer housing you want, but this will be like the brain of your timer. So when that comes, you can put the M3 40mm screws through here and just have it on this, but my plan is to have that slim housing for the alternate configuration that will actually run bolts that will run through there. So that's my plan, but if you do want to, you can put your 40mm screws in here. They're a little long, but there is enough room within the print to actually screw them all the way down. So one thing I forgot to mention is that with my, so we got TC, the twist cap 3 and twist cap 4 junctions. I actually, after I put the twist cap on, I like to zip tie these tight together just to give it some extra strength, just in case, because they do get pulled on a little bit. You don't want them coming loose, so I'll just zip tie the wires together. Just to give it a nice snug strength. All right, I can cut off that excess zip tie. Right, this time I didn't provide like a zip tie down for these. I just figured you're just gonna kind of stuff them in through there. So, yep, so that is that one. All right, so I've got those all removed. So now I'm going to go ahead and install my base, since that's what I'm using. So to attach the core to the base, there are 4 holes that you need to line up. So there's this one right here, there's another one right here, another one right there, and lastly one right there. And I'm going to use my M3 40mm length screws here, so I can run that through there, run that down through there, attach that. I want to make sure that my wires are all fed through here for my MP3. Okay, so I can go ahead and start tightening that down. I'm just going to do a loose fit first, make sure I get them all lined up. Alright, those are tightened down. So I'll go ahead and put my other screws in, right? So I'm going right there, going right there. All right, so now my core is all attached to my base. So now I can work on installing my wires to my MP3 and putting on this access door. Alright, so now that I've got my core installed on my base, I'm going to actually attach my MP3. So I'm going to go take my ground wire. Let's see here, so this goes like that. Take my ground wire, install that there. That's ground. Then I'm going to take my 5-volt, put it there. My yellow wire goes to TX. My green wire goes to RX. Okay, so now that that's installed, I can put that on there. Alright, I'm going to install my 3. So these are 3 screws here. These are M3 14mm length screws. Alright, so that is all secure. So that bottom access door is good to go. You can see I've got the little port for my MP3, or for my aux cord right there. So I can just plug that in like that. Alright, so now I've got my core installed on my base, and I've got my access door with the MP3 installed on it. I can tuck my charging cable in here. Alright, so now I can put my shell on. Okay, so I can put my base down, grab my shell. I'm going to look for this groove right here, so that needs to get lined up with where my LEDs are. So I'm going to just kind of thread this all on here, kind of tucking wires in as I go. Make sure I'm not pinching any wires. Kind of got to tuck in these wires over there. Alright, there we go. That is in place. So I can then flip it over and I can bolt it down. There's 4 spots to bolt that down, so that's here, 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 and there. So we're just going to install the M3 14mm length screws there. Okay, so that's all screwed in. I can go ahead and screw on my battery door now. So that is 2 14mm screws. Alright, that's my battery door all installed. Okay, so now I am ready to hook up my LEDs. Alright, so now let's attach the LEDs to the base. So the LEDs come with this backing that you can take off, and it's got like a sticky substance on the back. I found that that doesn't stick well enough to like 3D prints and things like that to actually hold on very well. So what I actually do is I will actually peel that off, and then I will actually stick it to just normal paper, and I'll stick that to that first, and then I'll glue the paper to my 3D print. I just use hot glue. You could also, I've used epoxy in the past as well, but it just, when you stick the stick to the paper and then glue the paper, that seems to work much better. Alright, so I'm just going to feed my LED down into there, and then I'm just going to go glue this on so it just wraps around like that. So I'm just going to go glue it on. Alright. Alright, so that is all glued on. Again, I just used hot glue to glue it on. Just start over here and just slowly work my way around. So I can go ahead and hook these in. So I can run my orange wire through there. Run that through there. Let's connect the orange wire. So orange to orange. And I can connect my power. Alright, and I can put those down in there. Get a zip tie. Tie that right there. Alright, cut off that excess zip tie. Alright, and my LEDs are all installed now. Oh, make sure I didn't get any of my buttons. Alright. So that has my LEDs installed. Alright, so up next we're going to install our buttons on layer 2. So this is layer 2. This cutout is for the LCD screen. This cutout is for the power switch. So when you have it in this orientation, you want the blue button on the left and you want the red button on the right. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off, feed it through that hole. Notice there's a chamfer right here. That chamfer, you want the chamfer going towards these buttons, right? So the completely flat edge is on the underside. Make sure that your buttons, they have little like your buttons have like little knobs here, so you make sure that drops into the right spot. You can just spin it around until you get to the right spot. Alright, and then you put on your retaining nuts. You don't have to tighten it down super tight yet. We'll do that in a minute. I'll do the same thing with my red one. Down the right spot. Put the retaining nut on there. Alright. And then I'm going to install my switch LED. So you put it in there. There's little tabs in there that you're going to line up. So it's just once you slide it on there, then you just twist it. I should put it in the spot. You can test the button, see that it triggers the switch. All right. Do the same thing for the blue one. All right. I'm going to rotate that, so I want these leads facing towards my cutout for my power switch. So once I have those in the correct spot, I'll go ahead and finish tightening down that retaining nut, make it nice and snug. Should be able to just do it hand tight. And there we go. So now those are all installed, ready to get installed onto the timer. Alright, so we can go ahead and install our buttons onto the shell. So this long one is the LCD. So I'm going to put my buttons down like that to make it easier, so that when I flip it onto here, it'll be in the right orientation. So then I can attach my buttons. So I'm going to attach my blue to blue on the right hand side. I'm going to attach my yellow to yellow on the right hand side. And I'm going to attach my black to black on the right hand side. Alright, so that is that button. And then I do the exact same thing on the other side. So blue to blue. Yellow to yellow. And black to black. Alright, so now I can actually start to, so I can lift this up and I can start to kind of feed these wires down into the cavity there. So kind of push those down. Push those ones down. So it can be a little tricky. Kind of getting it and angling it down so it's kind of knows where to go. Okay, and then you kind of just get in there, just kind of wiggle its way down until it's nice and firm against there. So that should be sitting nice and flush on this surface here. All right, and now it's ready for us to put the top on. Alright, so you can take your layer 1. I've got the little nameplate, so you got the FrankenTimer right there. So you can just take whatever color nameplate you want, and that should just snap into place. And there you go. Okay. So now that we've got our nameplate in place, we can go ahead and install this. So right, you got a cutout for the LCD screen, you got your button cutouts, you've got your power switch cutout, and you've got your rotary encoder cutout right there, rotary encoder cutout. And then you have 4 screws, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to slide this on there. Wiggle it on. Looks like I didn't. So here, I kind of got to shift my buttons a little bit to get them to properly align. Alright, so there we go. Right, so those buttons have a little bit of wiggle room in the holes they are on, so you just kind of have to shift them a little bit. Alright, and then I'm going to use my M3 14 millimeter long screws to do these 4 screws here. One, two, Alright, so now that is fully assembled. Alright, got my LEDs, got my port for my MP3 aux cord, got my door for my charging cords there. Got everything installed. Yep, got the access door all installed. So that's good to go. Alright, so we can go ahead and turn on. First, I'm going to actually plug in a speaker. So again, I've got a little aux port right there, so I can plug my speaker in. And then let's turn it on.
King of the Hill.
Alright, looks like the MP3 audio works. My buttons are lighting up, perfect. My LCD screen is lighting up. It wants to make sure that I've got this plugged into my USB power now. So one thing about this timer is you don't want to have the LEDs hooked up and be running and be powering it through the data port. At least not without the USB running. So you want to have it at least running off the USB power bank. So I can hit yes. Everything lights up. It's green. I can start to go through the menu. I still need to work on this rotary encoder. I haven't finished doing the programming for that yet, so that's going to be a program update, but I wanted to include it because I know I want to do that. So there you go. That is the assembly guide for the FrankenTimer. There should be a link in the description to the Facebook group. That's probably going to be the easiest way to troubleshoot it if you're having issues. So you can post something there, and either someone else that's been working on it, or I will try and keep an eye on that, and hopefully we can help you get yours working.